The Prepper Podcast, episode 37.
They've got to know whether or not their president's a crook.
The American people would never vote for socialism. He said under the name of liberalism, the American people will adopt every fragment of the socialist program.
The Prepper Podcast is an up-to-date survival podcast based on military, wilderness, and modern-day survival and may be found at theprepperpodcast.com. I am Ken Jensen, and this is the podcast about everything survival. My goal is to teach you strategies on self-reliance and to develop survival skills and critical thinking in everyone, resulting in a more resilient and more enjoyable life. This, once again, is episode 37, and today is going to be a pretty good show. We're going to discuss the 4th of July, the Declaration of Independence, and the Revolutionary War. We're going to also mention the Sons of Liberty and the Liberty Bell. So this is going to be kind of a historic type of show, and it is going to be really good, seeing how this show is actually going to come out on the 4th of July. So if you are getting this show when it comes out, I would say that every single one of you guys should probably play this show for your family. And hopefully your family will enjoy this. Okay, and I will try to remember to add a link to the blog that came out last Monday. There's a blog that I did on the 4th of July. And if I will either have that link to the blog or I will have some videos in my show notes. I went over the 4th of July with my children, and we went ahead and watched some videos and stuff for the 4th of July, you know, YouTube education, that kind of thing. So I will try to link to a couple of cool videos that I thought were pretty good for my children, and then I quizzed my children after they watched those videos a couple times. So it's a pretty good video. I think you guys should watch them. So the show notes for today's episode may be found at theprepperpodcast.com/037. Now, there's also something else different. I'm also going to start making it a little bit easier for you guys to get to my show notes. So you don't have to remember 037 because it's easy for me to say it. It's easy for you to remember it for a few minutes, but you know, a day later or something like that, if you don't remember the episode number, then you're not going to be able to find my show notes. So not only can you find today's episode at theprepperpodcast.com/037, but you can also find the show notes at theprepperpodcast.com/4th of July 2014. And that's all spelled out. It's just 4th of July, all words, all together. 2014 is the numbers. So theprepperpodcast.com/the words 4th of July, the numbers 2014. That will get you to today's show notes. Now for the housekeeping. If you would like to be a guest on the Prepper Podcast, then you can go to theprepperpodcast.com/guests, fill out the form. I will get the form, and I will try to set up a time for a guest podcast. Also, if you become a guest on my show, you will get your own URL. That's right. I will give a guest their own URL so they can send it to whoever they want, and it will be your name. Okay? Let's say I did one for Jay Bradbury recently, okay, and his first name is Jeremiah. So what I did is I gave him theprepperpodcast.com/Jeremiah Bradbury, all one word. And now he can send that to anybody. And he doesn't have to try to remember what episode number was I on or anything like that. He can just remember, hey, my name is Jeremiah Bradbury, so it was theprepperpodcast.com/Jeremiah Bradbury. So from now on, if you're a guest on my show, you will get your own URL. And there is yet another way to get on my show. If you do not want to be a guest on my show for a full episode or even a half episode, then you can give me a 1 to 2 minute phone call if you call the feedback line, and that is at 978-KNOWS-IT. That's KNOWS. 978-KNOWS-IT. And that would also be 978-566-9748. Or you can just visit theprepperpodcast.com and you can click the green banner and you can record. There will be a green banner that flies out from the right side. You just click on that banner and it will give you where you can record from the microphone on your computer. So have a microphone on your computer and you can record and the microphones on computers are pretty nice nowadays. It'll actually probably sound a lot better than the phone if you call in on the listener line. But I have both of those available for anybody. You can either call the listener line at 978-566-9748 or click the green banner on theprepperpodcast.com. Both of those will get you into my feedback segments whenever I do them. I don't do them until I get enough people to do them. So if you ask me a question and it takes me a while to get the feedback on my show, either one, it's because there's a delay for me to put it on my show for technical reasons, or number two, there is a delay because I'm waiting for a couple more people to call in. Either way, I promise you I will try my hardest to get to everybody's questions. All right, just because of time, I can't promise that I will get to everybody's questions, but I promise that I will listen to everybody's questions. And if I've covered it on the show, then I may not have an answer. I may just email that person back if you give me your email and your feedback. Nix that. Do not give me your email and your feedback. If you're going to give me your email during your feedback, make sure it is not during the normal segment of your feedback so I can cut your email out, because you don't want everybody to have your email. So make sure it's separate from the rest of it. Anyways, all of that being said, go be a guest. Give me some feedback. I would love to make this show great for you guys. And the only way to do that is for you guys to start asking the questions. So now I think we should get to the news segment. Jay Bradbury of PreparePDX.com has been doing the news segment for us every week now for quite some time. And I understand how much work goes into it. And I hope you guys do too. He doesn't just go to one little website and grab a couple news articles and do this. If you notice, he's got YouTube videos, he's got government websites, and he's even got news websites. I mean, he's all over the place. And he scours the internet for all of this news for you guys. This guy is really good at finding news. And he doesn't just find news. He's also finding things like you can sign up to, be part of webinar series and stuff like that. Like last week, I think he shared the where you could go to the Summer of Survival, that kind of stuff. This guy's doing all this stuff for you guys for nothing. So I would really appreciate it if you would go over to his website. Jay, if you're listening, make sure that your website is available for people, and make sure that you have something in place where you can either do for them or sell for them, because I want everybody who's listening to this segment right now, you can just pause it right now. I want you to go over to Jay's site, see what kind of things he has available as far as products and services, and give him a shot, because, man, I think he's doing a great job, and I really appreciate what he does for us. And with that, let us go to the news segment by Jay Bradbury of PreparePDX.com.
Thanks, Ken. And now for your news flash. Iraq refinery targeted amid fears foreign workers were seized. Iraq security forces battled insurgents targeting the country's main oil refinery and said they regained partial control of a city near the Syrian border Wednesday, trying to blunt a week-long offensive by Sunni militants who diplomats fear may have also seized some 100 foreign workers. In economic news, the economy plunged in the first quarter according to the latest government revision to GDP. It sank a negative 2.9%. In alternative energy news, new high-energy rechargeable batteries could be coming your way soon. Researchers developed molten air battery with commercial potential. And that's your news. Back to you, Ken.
Thanks, Jay, for that awesome news segment. I did watch the YouTube video. It was all right. I think it was okay. I did see the oil thing about Iraq, and you know what? Does any of this really surprise anybody that there's fights over oil? Does this surprise anybody? And as far as the economic stuff, the economic, our economy is down further than what the government expected. Big deal. We all know that the economy is artificially inflated anyways. Or deflated. We already know that the economy is crap and it's being hidden. So we don't really need to go over that right now because that's not what the 4th of July is. But I thought that kind of fit in with the fact that I'm talking about the 4th of July. I'm going to be talking about, the Sons of Liberty and how they were traitors and how they hated their government and how they fought back. So it's kind of interesting that this actually does kind of tie in with what I'm going to be talking about because we can learn from history. So with that, let's get into the discussion about the 4th of July. Today, I think the 4th of July means a couple things to people, all right? And we're talking about people nowadays. I mean, what's the first thing you think of when you think of 4th of July? You think summer fun with the family, barbecues. You think if you're a big guy that likes beer and stuff like me, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to sit back, I'm going to kick back, I'm going to do barbecue, I'm going to drink a beer. And we all know that the wives, they do a lot of the prep work anyways. They're doing a lot of the work while we're just standing in front of the flames of the grill being manly and stuff, drinking beer. So that's probably what you think about. You think about barbecue out at the lake, drinking some beer. You might think about 4th of July parades or fireworks. And these are all great, fun things to do. But with all this, and with all of this being pushed on the general public, we forget about a lot of the things that 4th of July is really supposed to mean. So we're going to get into what that is supposed to mean. I mean, we let our family gatherings and our cookouts get in the way of our actual knowledge of Independence Day. All we care about is what are we going to do on 4th of July. But every single holiday, I try to stop and I try to think about, well, why do we have this holiday? And let me learn more about it. Every single year, I know a little bit more about the 4th of July and Independence Day and the American Revolution. Why do I know so much about that stuff? Because every year, every 4th of July, I spend time and I teach myself new stuff. I know 1776. I know 1775, which we'll talk about this stuff later. And the reason why I know this stuff is because I go and I learn. And it doesn't matter if it takes you years and years and years to learn this stuff. What you need to understand is all of this has stories to it. All of it has underlying principles to it, and you can learn every bit of that. You don't have to remember 4th of July 1776. All you have to do is understand why the stuff was done. All you need to do is understand what it is for, and you need to know the stories of the men and women back then so that you know what a true man is supposed to be. All right? So let me get off that soapbox and let's go back into we'll start into how schools have been teaching Independence Day. I'm not really a big fan of how schools are teaching Independence Day either, but they're saying the revolution was declared against the British on 4th of July, 1776. The Declaration of Independence was signed, and there was a celebration where the Liberty Bell was rang and it got cracked because it was hit so hard. But the thing is that's not even really accurate, all right? And, so let's talk about the Declaration of Independence real quick. On the 4th, it got signed. Well, that's what schools teach you, right? Okay, well, I'm not saying that schools are wrong, but they're really bad about omitting very important information, very important data. And why are they wrong? Why are they real bad about omitting this data? Well, they omit the data because they don't want you, I'm sorry about that, I coughed, but they don't want you to know all the gory details. They don't want you to know everything about what's going on. Why would they? I mean, so that you can become like the other guys, so you can become like the Sons of Liberty, who are pictured to be men that are noble, and they were great governmental people. And no, they weren't. The colonial governments are who were traitorous. They're the ones who fought back. All right, what is the Declaration of Independence? It's a document signed by the local governing body at the time. It was done so to explain to the British king that we were tired of the British government overstepping its bounds and consistently overtaxing the people. Governments overstepping their bounds, governments overtaxing people, and not really representing the people. Where the crap have we heard that before? Where have we seen that before? Oh, that's right. That's what we're dealing with now. We're dealing with a freaking huge government that overtaxes us because they can't stop spending freaking money. They force even more taxation on us due to forced inflations by printing more money, and they overstep their bounds on a constant basis. So instead of just being a group that was meant to protect the rights of the people, which we will discuss here in a little bit, they were supposed to protect the rights of the people. And instead of protecting the rights of the people, what are they doing? They're overstepping. They're not protecting us from anybody. If anything, they're protecting themselves from us because they realize how much of bad guys they are. I'm going to keep this PG. I was going to say something else, but like I said, I told you to play this for your family, so let's keep this PG rated. They realize how much they overstep, and they realize how people feel about that, so they have to protect themselves from us. NSA is not security. Well, it is. NSA is security for them. It's not security for me. The NSA has done nothing for me that I know of, and whatever they have done, it's very little. All right. So, the rough draft of the Declaration of Independence was written in the Green Dragon Tavern over a mug of ale. So, these guys were drinking, and they were sick and tired of what's going on. So, over some beer, they decided that they were going to write the Declaration of Independence because they were freaking tired. They were sick and tired of this government, and they wanted the king to see how sick and tired they were. So after a few beers, they got a few beers into them, they decided to start writing the Declaration of Independence. Now here's something really interesting. Well, the fact of the matter is there was a little bit of marijuana at the time too. I guess you didn't know that. And here's the thing. The liberty of the United States was founded on a document that was written by people drinking beer and smoking pot. Now, I don't smoke anything. I wouldn't, and I wouldn't recommend anybody do it, honestly, unless you've got medical issues that would make you want to. But I know that it's got a lot of uses other than inhalation. I know that it has a lot of uses, and I think it's dumb to outlaw a plant that was put on here. And, if you work in an area where being stoned would inhibit your job, well, that company has their own right to tell you that they don't want you doing that stuff. And if you do that stuff, fire you. So you have to understand, I think that governmentally they should not be banning this, but privately it can be banned left and right for each company, because you don't have to work at that company. You could work somewhere else that would let you do that. But like I'm saying, I would never recommend anybody to smoke marijuana because, it's just not something I think is healthy. It's not good for your body, so why would you do it? Now, it is good for other things that are really good for your body, and it is good for people that have certain ailments. So I don't see anything wrong with that. Now, the guys that were drinking at the Green Dragon Tavern, well, guess what? The group of guys at the Boston Tea Party, guess what those guys did? They actually were getting drunk at the Green Dragon Tavern, and they were sick of the taxation. So they decided that they were going to go and dump all this tea into the port. So I thought it was pretty cool. And obviously it wasn't just tea that they dumped, but I thought it was pretty cool to kind of look at the history of here. And the Green Dragon Tavern is actually in service today in Boston. Okay, so if you're ever around, I don't know what the place is like, but I think it'd be pretty cool to visit the Green Dragon Tavern, where the Sons of Liberty ended up drinking and writing the Declaration of Independence, even though a school is going to teach you that it was written in like a library or somebody's study. It wasn't. So since we're talking about it, we may as well go ahead and continue with the men, the signers of the Declaration of Independence. These guys were revolters. They revolted against the government. They were not considered stand-up people at the time for the British king. The government did not like them. And guess what? There were colonists who also did not like them. They were called Loyalists. And the Loyalists were loyal to the British king. But these guys weren't. These guys were considered traitors. They were, think about it. They're felons. They're felons. All right? They are felons according to the crown. Now, we're in a republic. It's a little different. Everything's a little bit different. Our government's still tyrannical, but it's not a king, and there's no vote or anything like that, which, be honest with you, I think most of the voting is worthless anyways. But that beyond itself, at least there wasn't a monarchy. And, anyways, they were felons to the monarchy. They were traitors. They were not considered stand-up guys. But I'll tell you something else they were. They were men of action. They were men of power. They were men of courage. They were the men that signed the Declaration of Independence, the I hate you letter to the king. And John Hancock, the first one to sign the Declaration of Independence. I am going to make my signature big enough so I know that the king can see it all the way from Britain to here. And he was the largest signature on the Declaration of Independence. That's the type of people we had. Not only were they revolting against their government, their tyrannical monarchy of a government, but they were in the face of the king. They had power, they had courage, and most of them had the ability to speak. They had great rhetoric. So let's just step back a little bit. Let's go ahead and discuss the Revolutionary War a little bit, the War for Independence. April of 1775, war was declared on Great Britain. Part of that was an early warning system. Part of the early warning system was 1 by land, 2 by sea. Okay, now what they're talking about here is they're talking about lanterns. You ride with 1 lantern if the enemy is coming by land. You ride with 2 lanterns if the enemy is coming by sea. All right? And they were at the North Church steeple. That's where the lookout was. April 18th, 1775. So shortly after the declaration of war on Great Britain, Paul Revere was at the steeple. And he was supposed to ride to Lexington to warn John Hancock and Sam Adams. That's right, Sam Adams, the guy who is supposedly on the beer. And he was actually a brewer, just so you guys know that. So for all you guys who like to brew your own beer or like craft beer, Sam Adams was a brewer at the time. But even though he was a lookout, he was actually caught off guard. And it was kind of late whenever he got a good start. But even though he was caught off guard, he went ahead and he rode. Okay, he rode to Lexington. But instead of going straight there like he was supposed to, he stopped at all the houses on his way. And, obviously told everybody the redcoats are coming, the redcoats are coming. Okay, so that's where that phrase comes from. And, you guys can read the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, the poem, if you want. But he was caught off guard, and he stopped at houses the entire way on his way to Lexington on horseback. So he got to John Hancock, and Sam Adams. Okay, he got to Hancock and Adams, and then he was joined by a rider with the name William Dawes. William Dawes and Paul Revere continued on to Concord, where there is a hidden ammunition bunker, essentially, of hidden ammunition for the Continental Army. On their way to Concord, they were joined by Samuel Prescott. Now, all three of these guys were on their way to get the hidden ammunition for the Continental Army. But then they were intercepted by the British battalion, and all three of them were arrested. Now, it's not real important for us to talk about the fact that, some of them were let go and stuff like that later, but they were intercepted on their way. That's really the riot of Paul Revere. Now, early on, there was a really impressive turnout for the war. People were, they had a lot of people. They had a lot of volunteers. They had all kinds of stuff. And they were doing really well. Even though they were kind of outmanned by the British Army, they actually were performing quite well. But the people that were part of the early efforts, the large turnout of volunteers, they started realizing how long it was going to be. And because they were realizing how long it was going to be, the numbers started waning off a little bit. All right, the numbers started dropping a bit. And gradually over time, just the numbers kept going down and down. So in late 1776, the colonies began cash incentives, okay? And then even into 1778, then they started actually drafting people, okay? So I already told you that a lot of Americans were Crown Loyalists. That's about 15 to 20% of the people in the colonies were Crown Loyalists, and they fought in the British Army. And the Native Americans were fighting on both sides. All right, they fought on the entire reason that they fought on the British side was because they wanted to save their land, and they knew if the colonies won that their land would be gone. So they fought on the British side, and then the other ones fought on the colonial side, but and for the same reason, really. Well, in the Peace of Paris Treaty that was signed, all of the Loyalist Native Americans lost their land instantly. So that was great for the guys that fought for the British government. They were treated real well. The others that fought for the colonies actually made out quite a bit better initially. Ultimately, they lost their land too, though, because, I told you, these guys, the colonists weren't great people. They were just people of action and people of courage and people of power. So I'm not saying that I agree with everything that they did, but, that's just what they were. That's who they were. All right. Most people aren't perfect. Most people aren't great, but these were men of great courage and action. Now, in 1781, the war was unofficially over. Fighting had stopped. A lot of the fighting had stopped. There weren't really any battles or anything like that going on. But in 1783 was the official word that the war was over, and that's when the peace treaty was signed. All right. Now let's just talk real quick about the Liberty Bell, which was not broken by the 4th of July celebration. Okay, it was what it is the Liberty Bell was improperly cast. It had been broken and recast and broken several times. It was a flaw in the casting for the bell. During the war, the bell stayed intact because it wasn't rang on the 4th of July. It was rang when the Declaration of Independence was read aloud. And we'll talk about that day here in a minute. So we're going to go back into the Declaration of Independence. The signing of the Declaration of Independence is why we celebrate the 4th of July. Okay? But the first draft was written by Thomas Jefferson in the Green Dragon. Independence was actually declared on July 2nd, 1776. But it was still a draft, and it was signed by John Hancock and Charles Thompson. John Hancock was a congressional leader, and Charles Thompson was the Secretary of Congress. And John Adams, who was also part of this, wrote to his wife Abigail Adams, who, I don't have in the show notes, but Abigail Adams was actually well known for rounding up all kinds of metal and stuff of their own, of John and Abigail's own stuff, and actually casting bullets and stuff out of it. She was actually known for helping the war efforts a lot. But anyways, in one of their letters to Abigail, John Adams said that July 2nd would be a holiday. He said that this would be a day that is known throughout the country, and he said that it will be celebrated with great effects and stuff like that. You can just Google the letter to Abigail, and I'm sure you'll find it. But it wasn't actually You know what? That's later on. I'll get to that in a minute. But it was read aloud in the city. So the first signatures on it was on the 2nd. And this was the biggest, to John Adams at least, this was the biggest milestone, right? And the next milestone was on July 8th. That is where they read the Declaration of Independence. Okay? Now, so that you can stop listening to me, I'm going to play a clip for you right now, and it is going to be a reading of the Declaration of Independence, much like the way they would have read it on July 8th. So I want you guys to listen up. It's only a couple minutes long, and then I will be back.
When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles, and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light or transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shewn that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government, and to provide new gods for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation to his assent shall be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly, for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They, too, have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must, therefore, acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
I hope you guys enjoyed that reading of the Declaration of Independence. But let's go back into me explaining more dates and things like that. The final signature of the Declaration of Independence wasn't until August 2nd, 1776. That's right. So the final signature on the Declaration wasn't until August 2nd of 1776. And it wasn't even delivered to Great Britain until the following November. So why in the world do we celebrate the 4th of July as our Independence Day when the draft was done on the 2nd, the first signature was done on the 2nd, the final signature wasn't until August 2nd, the reading was the 10th, and it wasn't even given to Great Britain until the following November. So why in the world do we care about the 4th? Well, the 4th of July was the day that Congress stopped hashing out the draft. Once it was considered that it was a good draft, then Congress had to hash it out for about 2 days. Because you have to understand, this was a document that was meant to rally troops. It was meant to build the morale of the people and to get people to volunteer to fight. They were supposed to fight against their tyrannical government, and this was a very important document because this is the document that meant life or death. This was the document that they knew meant whether they were going to fail or succeed. So they hashed it out for about 2 days, in only a way that Congress could do, of course. But they stopped hashing out the draft, and it was agreed on the 4th of July. This date was the newest revision. Okay, this was the last revision of the Declaration of Independence, and that revision was the one that was signed in August, finally signed in August. But it wasn't actually a national holiday until 1870, which was a century later. So, let's break it on down. The story is this. A bunch of guys ticked off at the government for high taxes, removal of liberties, and tyrannical rule. They declared war against the crown, and they declared their independence against apart from the crown. Okay? They told the crown to go shove it. We no longer need you. We can govern ourselves. And then later in writing, in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, they gave us our rights to protect us from the exact same tyranny of this government, just like they fought against the other government of Britain. They knew how government was. They knew that government was going to grow. They knew that government was going to infringe on our rights, and they did whatever they could to get rid of the ability for the government to rule tyrannically against us. And still, we've allowed this country to be ruled by an idiotic, tyrannical, high-spending government. I bet these guys will be turning over in their graves right now. So, that's pretty much the show. I just want to remind you guys, in celebration of the 4th of July, I want you to remember these traitors, the guys who were considered traitorous, evil men with the government. Now, with every government, you're going to have people that are loyal to the government. And you're going to be considered a traitorous person to the Loyalists. But they were sick of tyranny, they were sick of taxes, and they were sick of their rights being taken away all the time. They were extremely handicapped in numbers, but they still fought. They fought back for their rights against their government. And I wonder how many of us would actually do the same. How many of you would actually fight against your government with all their infinite weaponry and stuff like that they're constantly spending our money to develop so that they can wage war against other countries and they can wage war against ourselves if we ever rose up against them? How many of you would have the courage to fight against them? Fortunately, in today's age, a lot of times you don't have to resort to violence. That's just the way that the age is, and that's a very fortunate thing. But, not everybody's a soldier. And I understand that. Not everybody's a soldier. But everybody can keep watch. Every single one of you can keep watch. We were, considering the documents that have come out, he was considered a traitor for sharing all these documents. And if you don't know who I'm talking about the guy who has WikiLeaks.org, okay? I'm talking about the guy who leaks the information from the government. All right, the WikiLeaks guy, okay? He is considered to be a traitor to the government, all because he releases information that we should have anyways, because all government information should be completely public. All government information is funded by us and supposedly for us. And he's considered a traitor because he did that. He's considered a traitor because he gave us the information we're supposed to already have. And he's in hiding because the government is going after him. And if he gets caught, he's probably dead. But the fact of the matter is the guy's not waging war, is he? He's sharing some freaking documents. He's sharing digital information. And the government can come after him and wage war on him, and they can kill him. But the fact of the matter is he's not a warrior. He is a sentinel. He is watching, and he is releasing information, and he is keeping his eye on our government. Okay? He is keeping watch. And everybody should be keeping watch. Everybody should be sharing information with each other. There should be nothing that this government does. A mouse in the White House should not be able to fart without everybody knowing about it. Anyways, back to... So these guys decided to fight back against their government so that they could have their rights. So that they could govern themselves. Self-government. I want you to teach this story to your spouse and your children. And I hope you guys have a great 4th of July. And I hope you eat a burger for me. And I hope you drink a beer for me. Because I promise you I'll be drinking one for you. And with that, this was Ken Jensen of ThePrepperPodcast.com teaching you strategies on self-reliance so that you can build a more resilient and enjoyable life. Have a wonderful week and have a fantastic 4th of July. This is Ken, signing out.